Good day, I'm junior researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be covering Draig Goch. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe as to not miss any future lectures, and also if you're enjoying these lectures and find them informative, please like the video. I would also be very happy to hear your thoughts, views and stories of your interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. So, to begin, as always, we'll start with our general announcements. Firstly, I will be endeavouring in future to release these videos on Fridays, as the druid in charge of my office has explained to me that this would be a more appropriate time to do so. Secondly, Herobrine Harry 7698, the leader of the rescue team sent to the other side of the Perpetual Tear, has remade contact. The reason for the communications blackout was sadly due to the team coming under sudden and sustained attack by Homo floresiensis. Of the team sent, only 4 survived the 12-hour defense, and as such they were forced to retreat back to our sphere. From the report, Homo floresiensis attack in large hordes with no concept of self-preservation and appear to continue the fight even when mortally wounded, with some even dying mid-swing of their weapon from their injuries. This obviously warrants a change in strategy when dealing with the subsphere in future. Thirdly, concerning the Blackwood Miners Institute contract. Hunters Witchy, Douglas Wolfen and Clayton took on the bounty for the Wraith and were able to both infiltrate the building and identify the deceased person the spirit was mimicking. The investigation was not entirely straightforward, however, with Douglas Wolfen receiving rather a few cuts from the Wraith, who had taken a specific disliking to them, as Wraiths are wont to do. However, as stated, the 3 were able to identify the originally deceased person and perform the last rites that were required to force the Wraith to return back into the benign form of a spirit. The team showed a great deal of skill in navigating the obstacles constructed by the Wraith, with special mention to Douglas Wolfen, who despite being repeatedly attacked, remained calm and was instrumental in the investigation. Finally, a Path of Life entropic necromancer is suspected to be active within the town of Cumvelin. From what we can discern, we believe that this individual is the same necromancer that escaped capture near the town of Abereron. If correct, the target goes by the name of Gareth the Unborn, and like others of his path, he is attempting to create an immortal body for himself. Thankfully, he appears to have low self-control in regards to creating his new body, and has already begun construction of this new form. We have discovered discarded parts outside the town of Cumvelin, and the victims do indeed match Gareth's type of target, specifically men between the ages of 18 and 22. Based on the previous encounters with Gareth, hunters can expect him to attempt to run instead of directly fight. The order suggests luring him into a trap rather than attempting to directly engage due to his flighty nature. This is an open specialty contract that can be undertaken by any hunter over the rank of apprentice. If you are interested, please contact your local order office. Before Draig Goch himself can be discussed, I must first explain 2 things. Firstly, the category of entity known as Titanic Life. These are entities that, due to their immense size, should not be able to exist within our home sphere. However, due to either them hailing originally from another sphere, therefore operating with that sphere's laws while in ours, or influenced by a powerful entity that changed how physics acts upon them, they are able to persist and even thrive where they should not. These beings are a wide and varied group, with some acting as simple animals while others being unfathomably intelligent to the point where their very thoughts rewrite reality. Unlike the subject of today's lecture, many Titanic life forms are actually unable to even perceive smaller forms of life like ourselves, with many theories being put forward as to why this is, with one theory even positing that these beings view the length of our existence in a similar way to how we perceive the length of a blink, thus beyond notice. Secondly, we must discuss the Fae ability to change the form of something while the nature remains the same. Many powerful Fey beings, such as the She or Hag, possess the ability to transform life from one form to another. However, the ability to change the nature of a being appears to elude them. As an example, if a Fey were to change Alexander the Great into a simple cat, the cat would have no memory of the conquest of its former life, nor of the cutting of the Gordian knot. However, the cat would most likely form a large territory and may even begin to almost command other cats around it. The form has changed, but not the nature. These two pieces of information are important, as Draig Goch, just as the other dragons, were once human kings and queens. Much of the actual history has been lost to time, with only small pieces of evidence in the form of legend remaining. From what can be pieced together, after the fall of Arthur and the disappearance of Merlin, 5 of the different Celtic rulers of Britain, driven to desperation by the Saxon invasion, used one of the old rituals to call forth a powerful Fey. Before the Roman invasion, Fey worship was common practice across Britain, but the Romans disliked the more brutal aspects of the faith, pushing it out to the fringes of society. Later, after the Roman retreat from Britain, Arthur expressly forbade the practice under the advice of Merlin. The being who came to answer the summons was, while unknown to us today, extremely powerful. Now, the Fey in general are infinitely slow to let go of grudges. However, due to the Saxon invasion, it is thought that this particular Fey feared losing their anchor to our sphere, the Celtic people. As such, a pact was formed, with a great many sacrificed to pay for the deal, and the 5 Celtic leaders were changed forever. They were transformed into what would eventually be known as dragons. Draig Goch, Draig Gwyn, Draig Glas, Draig Worth, and Draig Felin. Upon the change, each would lose all memory of their previous lives as humans, but retain the essence of who they were, kings and queens. While the 5 began as allies, after the change, each began to focus upon their own people, and each would go about this in their own way. Draig Goch created the Covenant of Blood, infusing a single drop of his blood within each of his people. This contract bound Draig Goch to protect his people as long as he is able, while binding the people to offer up 20 souls per year to him of his blood. From the scant accounts we have, he was a fair and trusted guardian, though the covenant that is still in place today binds us to continue the feeding each year. Over time, the feeding has taken on its own ritual and pomp, simply due to the length of time we've been doing it. It began as a somber affair, as souls would volunteer to feed the dragon. However, over time, the event has morphed into something approaching a celebration. Upon the 3rd of April each year, hunters gather around the mountain where Draig Goch slumbers. 30 hunters will step forward toward the mountain, proclaiming that, "I shall not look away. I will observe the feast." This was originally done on the day. However, after many events where too few stepped forward, and on one occasion where far too many stepped forward, the Order began creating specialty contracts for the role. These hunters act as the shepherds. The shepherds were originally meant as the final witness for those who sacrificed themselves, while also ensuring that they did not turn away from what they had volunteered to do. Today, they act more as security, ensuring that the volunteers are fed to Draig Goch. Those outside the mountain would originally face toward it in silence, taking a single drink to honor both the dragon and those he would consume. Today, while many aspects still exist, they have morphed somewhat, since the Order has discovered that Draig Goch will accept those who are cursed, infested, infected, and mutated beyond any point of saving. At least outside the mountain, it has become more of a celebration. Today, while the hunters outside the mountain still face toward it, they now drink heavily while singing songs that proclaim the glory of the dragon. This is, at this point, mostly for fun, akin to Christmas carols, though many hunters today, while not worshipping the dragon, do still respect and honor him as our guardian. Now, the obvious question is, if Draig Goch is the guardian of Wales, Why has he not left his mountain in so very long, leaving the threats of the spheres to us to face? I'm going to read to you one of the old legends, one that almost certainly has strayed away from the true events, however the battle it recounts does appear to have happened. Invaders have once again come to Britain. The Saxons, in larger numbers than ever before, have arrived to take the isle away. Unlike the Romans who sought to subjugate, the Saxons seem intent to exterminate. The Celtic people, though fighting valiantly upon their chariots, would be pushed to the edge of their home by the relentless march of the armies of the enemy. Celtic King Vortigern, exhausted and cowed by the Saxon invaders, fled to the west with his people. His intent? To build a new, great and powerful fortress to protect his remaining citizens. Finding a large and imposing mountain, Vortigern would order his men to fell the trees ready to construct the walls. He would have the peak of the mountain flattened and the foundations dug out, ready for the construction. The men worked vigorously, spurred on by the threat of the Saxons moving inexorably closer. With the foundations placed and the light failing, Vortigern and his people would make camp for the night. Late into the night, the king would be woken by the earth beneath his feet shaking violently, while the camp all around him fell to the ground. By morning's light, the damage from the previous night was lain bare. The camp and tents his people had built had all collapsed, with no one getting the sleep they would need for the construction of the fort. What work they had managed on the fort the day before had been severely damaged, with the foundations now loosened from the earth and the logs they had gathered rolling away down the mountain. King Vortigern remembered the old stories of times when the earth beneath their feet would shake. He would convince his people that it was only bad luck and they should continue their work. So once again his people would build, this time with no sleep. But by day's end, they were able to repair the foundations. Just before the tired king returned to his now reconstructed tent, a young boy would approach him with a warning. "My good king, though I am loath to darken your sleep with unfortunate knowledge, I must inform you that the earth will again quake tonight." Vortigern placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and, with a warm smile, would say, "Young man, though I know the night was frightening, I'm sure tonight will be calm." The young boy, with an eerie smile, would ask the king to come find him in the morning, as he was not yet ready to listen. Before the king could respond, the boy ran off into the night. Just as the young boy had predicted, the mountain once again shook beneath the people's feet, and all the work of the previous day had been undone. The king, in a sleep-deprived rage, would order the strange boy be brought before him. Though no matter how much the people searched for the strange child, no one could find him or even identify who he was. Just as his people were beginning to believe that their king had imagined the boy, he appeared from the middle of a crowd, all of which hadn't noticed him until after he had stepped out. With a respectful bow, the boy would introduce himself to the king as Owen, and before the king could speak, he announced to all around that he knew what was causing the mountain to shake. King Vortigern, though affronted by the rudeness of the child, would ask for an explanation. Owen, with wisdom far beyond his years, would begin to explain. Beneath this great and ancient mountain, a battle rages each and every night. Two dragons, one the color of blood and fire, the other the color of bone and snow. The great mountain, home to the red dragon for eons, invaded by the white, and the two have fought ever since, though the red dragon is faltering. If the red dragon should fall, the mountain will be lost for all time. The crowd fell silent. Something about the boy's short tale bit deep into each and every one of them. All of the people, battered, broken, and victimized as they were, couldn't help but empathize with the plight of the red dragon. The king, feeling his and his people's fate was mirrored by this red dragon, felt himself fill with resolve as a new plan formed in his mind. He would commit to digging into the mountain to aid the red dragon in defending his home. Then and only then would he build a new and safe place for his people. Vortigern and those who follow him would suffer one more night of the thunderous shaking upon the mountain. Then, the moment it ceased, the king and his people sprang into action. As if their very lives depended on it, as in many ways they did, they dug into the mountain, shifting earth and rock by the ton, knowing that if they didn't make it by nightfall, all their work would be undone. Just as nightfall threatened to fall, the end of the tunnel would crumble away into a vast and ominous chamber. The chamber itself was twice as large as the mountain above it, reaching so far below into the earth that all that could be seen was the deep, swallowing darkness. Dread began to envelop the people who had worked so hard to be there. There was nowhere for them to stand, nowhere for them to fight, and only a great drop into oblivion. Hearing the rumble begin of two titanic creatures stirring, the king quickly came to a decision. Not wanting his people in danger inside the tunnel they dug, he ordered them back to the surface, but before they left, he would take a bow and quiver from one of the archers. Vortigern committed himself to stay below the mountain, alone. What he saw then defied all reason and logic. Scales large enough to build cities upon, eyes so vast they could be considered seas, teeth whose size put mountains to shame, wings so terribly great that if unfurled the sun would never kiss the earth again, and tails so long they could almost encircle the world. King Vortigern felt a fool. To believe he would have any agency here, to believe he could somehow aid in this fight of titans was preposterous. He doubted they could even perceive him, so small he was when compared to their awesome greatness. Vortigern sat on the edge of the precipice as the tunnel behind him collapsed and looked out on the closest thing anyone would ever see to a battle of gods. As the two monstrous creatures slashed and bit into each other, the king saw as scales that could flatten castles were lost by the hundreds in the fray, falling the great distance into the dark. He saw as true rivers, no, waterfalls of blood flowed from both combatants. He felt his skin burn as fire hotter than the sun burst forth from great maws and twisted and fought a battle of its own with their fleeting lives. Lost almost completely in his awe, he almost didn't notice that the great red dragon was staring with one eye at him. Almost completely lost in his rapturous state of tremendous terror, the king's mind almost completely failed him until the tiniest flicker of dust thrown up by the battle hit his eye. The king, reacting to the sudden annoyance, was thrown from his stupor in an instant, and an idea formed. Vortigern, still trembling and with only a small ledge left to stand on, pulled himself back to his feet, notching an arrow to his bowstring. He would need to wait until the right moment and hope the red dragon knew what he was planning. The fight continued for hours, the king nearly falling to his death numerous times, but each time just managing to save himself. Both dragons looked exhausted and near ready to collapse, but the red dragon had slowly been circling, trying over the hours of vicious battle to lead the white dragon to just in front of the king and his bow. Now, the king loosed the arrow, streaming through the air and then lost in the unfathomable depths of the white dragon's eye. As it reacted on instinct, trying to clear the irritant from its eye, the red dragon pounced, biting deep into the white dragon's neck. The two dragons slammed into the great wall of the cave, knocking stones loose from above, which fell down and on to the king. Vortigern would awaken at his camp 3 days later, his people explaining that they had dug back into the mountain the following day to attempt to save their king. They had found him unconscious and half dangling over the precipice, the tremendous cave silent now except for the slow, rhythmic breathing coming from somewhere far below. The people had already gotten a good way into constructing the new fort now that the shaking had stopped, but the king only had one question on his mind. Where is the boy who knew of the dragons? But no matter how hard they searched, he was nowhere to be found, and as the people spoke of the boy, a realization hit them all. They each and every one of them remembered the boy completely differently from each other. No one knew if the boy was wizard or fae, but somehow they all, especially the king, felt that he, along with the red dragon, had saved them all. The covenant and blood we share with Draig Goch compels us to maintain the feeding, along with forbidding us from actively acting against him. There are more unfortunate aspects to this deal that are less known due to Draig Goch being in slumber since his battle with Draig Gwyn. Specifically the dragon's decree. This binds all of us who share his blood to obey his command. As I'm sure you can imagine, this is an intolerable situation. Though Draig Goch is described as a benevolent being, it must be remembered that this is by early first millennium standards. He is still healing from his battle, still deep within his slumber. However, if he were to awaken, it would be catastrophic, not only for Wales, but for the world as well. His only concern is the growth of those who share his blood, and he would attempt to achieve this with all the tact and grace of a Dark Age king with a superweapon. Beyond this, it should be obvious to most that collaborating with an entity, even an entity that claims good intentions for us, is counterproductive to our stated goal set down by Merlin himself. I understand that this may fall on deaf ears, as I'm very much aware that many hunters still proclaim with blood and fire before beginning each hunt, but it's an entity. It was a man, but now it's an entity. A near godlike being created with fey magic that has complete control over us if it should ever wake. We should be working with other anti-incursion organizations to find a way to deal with this unfortunate situation, as stated, we cannot act directly against the dragon ourselves. At the very least, we must find a way to break the covenant, as, at least speaking for myself, I do not enjoy the idea of any being having control over me. I fully understand the desperation of our predecessors. The Order was overwhelmed, weakened by wars with men, and overrun with entities flooding in without Merlin's protection. But is safety worth the loss of our agency? Not simply rules to follow, allowing society to run, but binding commands that must be obeyed. We are placed in an incredibly difficult situation today, as technically speaking, we are compromised. Though it has been over 1,000 years since this power has been exercised, it is still our sword of Damocles. But that will be all for today. With Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom, thank you.